On this episode of Skeptiko, Alex talks with Jonathan Talat Phillips about his new book, The Electric Jesus.
If you buy into materialism, both as an individual, if you think you're a biological robot and that's all you are, well, man, you're lost. And if you buy into materialism as it exists in our society, that we need to get all we can and we need to go bomb other people, all that stuff, you're lost. But as soon as you cross that chasm and you say, okay, there's something more, isn't there the risk there that we get into this backdoor materialism again, where we really think that we're building this stuff that's going to do this stuff for tomorrow? We're in control thing?
Once again, we've set up an either or, and I think it's both and. Because if I look at most of my clients, most of them need to get in the material world a little bit. They need to get in their bodies and find out how to figure out jobs and live an abundant life. That doesn't mean buy a mansion, but it just means to know how to support themselves and talk with people. On the other hand, I definitely saw this with like Occupy. It was very frustrating for me seeing all the projected anger. It's good to express anger, but when you project it at others, it creates more of that fear culture. It's actually a violent energy projected. And what I liked with Evolver in this is we're more of like, oh, how can you create? It's being and doing and creating a right relationship between that.
Stay with us for Skeptiko.
Welcome to Skeptiko, where we explore controversial science with leading researchers, thinkers, and their critics. I'm your host, Alex Tsakiris. And if you've been following Skeptiko for a while, then you know that this term worldview keeps coming up a lot. And it seems to me that that is much more than we would like to admit the driving force behind what we believe, what information we take in, and how we answer the most important questions in life about who we are and what really matters to us. And if you've listened to this show, then you also know that the idea of transformation is something that comes up quite a bit. And of course, those two go hand in hand. How open are you to transforming yourself and your worldview and therefore your beliefs? So it's always interesting to me when I run across people like today's guest, Talat Jonathan Phillips, who's willing to be open about the process they've gone through, the transformational process that has changed his worldview dramatically, and how that's led him on his journey. I think it's quite a fascinating exploration. I really enjoyed talking to him. Here's my dialogue with Talat Jonathan Phillips. Today we welcome Talat Jonathan Phillips to Skeptiko. Talat is the author of The Electric Jesus, The Healing Journey of a Contemporary Gnostic. He's also the co-founder of a rather amazing web magazine named Reality Sandwich and an equally amazing social movement at Evolvernet. Welcome to Skeptiko, Talat. Thanks so much for joining me.
Oh, great. It's great to be here. Thanks, Alex.
Well, your book, The Electric Jesus, it's just a great read. I mean, I was just blown away at how it pulls you in and just makes you want to turn page after page. It's of course a spiritual odyssey, as the name suggests, but it reads like a Tom Wolfe novel. Tell us a little bit about this book and how it came about and what people are going to find when they read it.
I think I might cite you on that, Alex. It reads like a Tom Wolfe novel there. Yeah, I mean, first I want to just say how I'm delighted that you love it. Like, I feel like it's a unique book. In a sense, there are very few books I feel that are out there like this, that are spiritual and counterculture and a memoir. I grew up reading On the Road and Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, which, the title kind of is a little bit of a reference to as well, in small town Colorado. And I just was like, where's the bus here? Wherever that bus is, I want to be on it.
Yeah.
And I feel like the book talks a little bit about, I feel like the buses are arriving for a lot of people in the festival culture, spiritual movement, ayahuasca, design science. Like, the buses are arriving. So some of the book tracks that, but it's really my journey. It's got two components to it, the book, for those who haven't read it. It's my journey from being a near atheist, really, very skeptical political activist, to going through a dark night of the soul and suddenly having mystical experiences happen to me and opening me up to a different reality and a kind of a different way of looking at activism from paradigm shifting perspectives, if you will. And then the other part of the book is once I start having these experiences, it's to my surprise, it's like a research book about energy and, quantum physics, and string theory is now saying the whole universe is energy, but how early mystics knew about that and shamans and have been tracking it across cultures throughout the planet. And I mean, my real surprise in it is how interested I was in early Christianity and that they knew all about this stuff. It's almost like they were yogis or shamans themselves, almost like they probably were like yogis or shamans themselves.
Well, that's interesting. There's a couple of aspects there that I wanted to pull out. Maybe let's start with this Christianity part, since that's the last thread that you left lying there. And Graham Hancock writes the introduction to your book, and he pulls out a quote from the book that I thought was very, very interesting, and it kind of set me thinking in a slightly different way than I had before. Let me read this. This is from Talat's book, The Electric Jesus. He writes this about the Judeo-Christian tradition, and that it is the underlying operating platform for our civilization, our languages, laws, mores, work ethic, sexuality, even our way of perceiving time. And it shapes our worldview whether we realize it or not. So I think that's interesting to look at that as a starting point, and then I guess juxtapose that with what you just said about maybe this deeper understanding about Christian Gnosticism. Do you want to walk that bridge for us a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's several avenues you could take addressing this. What I think you've described, or what that describes there, the operating system, is the cultural matrix that we're in. But I do think that traumatic myth, however it was formed, has spread with the growth of civilization across the planet, and a lot of violence and dominance. And now that's what we're operating in, is this fear consciousness, running, doing, struggling. God doesn't love us. We don't know how to be in community, all of these things. But there's definitely been politics always involved with the development of these type of Western doctrines. I mean, look at the New Testament. I talk about that a bit in The Electric Jesus, where, you had the old boys club at the Council of Nicaea with Emperor Constantine, where they decided that they're just going to limit all these beautiful texts to like 4 or 5 books. That's it.
And, that's a highly controversial area to get into. But if we can make it a little bit less controversial, what I think modern Gnosticism scholarship has clearly shown is that the first century Christians were extremely diverse in their belief systems. But why is that so relevant? Why do we need to go there to kind of reinterpret or rewrite that history?
Well, yeah, it's a healing and integration, because I think what we got is what the Gnostics, and I like to explain, the word Gnostic is a modern scholarly word. It's made up. I actually think there weren't necessarily Gnostics and Christians until there was a rift that happened after the upheaval of the second Jewish revolution against the Romans. But it was actually spiritual back then. It was about initiation into deeper levels of self and understandings of the cosmos, which is pretty much how I think more truer paths go, is whether it's Buddhism, yoga, or Sufism. There's an initiatic path of understanding, and gnosis is direct knowledge of the divine. That was taken out. And the Gnostics would call the systems that came in place these very egoic models. And I think there is a lot of hierarchy and control in them that create kind of a subservient classes, if you will, that comes with what the Gnostics would call waterless canals. That these new institutions that were arising and would eventually kill them off really didn't have that Christ consciousness, as they would say, that deeper connection with the universal wisdom and truth of oneness. And so I think we're all suffering from this, and it's laid in our laws and our mores and everything I talked about. And so there's a healing that can come when we start reintegrating the Judeo-Christian story and spiritual understanding into our lives without the political dogma behind it. Don't throw out the baby Jesus with the bathwater, essentially.
Yeah, I just think, and again, I don't know how to kind of keep probing on this, but I'm sure these are issues that you run into all the time. So who better to really talk about them with than you? And that's that all those topics are extremely controversial, even among people who are initiated, are awakened, enlightened, whatever you want to do. I just finished an interview with a guy named Rick Archer.
Rick, because you love Rick, yeah.
Buddha at the gas pump. So you can take the 150 different spiritual teachers that Rick has had on, or I can take the variety of spiritual seekers and finders that I've had on, and you can find a diversity of different opinions about spirit guides, about this ultimate source, this reality. They'd even be controversial about the existence of Jesus or any reality to Christianity or Judaism. So we have a challenge here as someone who is an earnest seeker to sort through and sift through all that. How do you guide people in that respect? You say you take a gentle approach, find your own path, but don't we wind up kind of trying to push people or pull people one way or another?
Whoa. So, I mean, the Santa Daime is very clear on this. This ayahuasca church that I was talking about, you cannot push anybody. You don't even invite somebody. What you do is maybe you talk about it once or twice if you're to somebody, if you're passionate, and then they might ask to come to a ceremony, and then you still usually don't. It's maybe like the third time they ask where you're like, okay, they're really actually being called to this. So, I mean, yeah, I go on interviews and talk about stuff and do a lot of public speaking. But I mean, mostly I only work with people that are called to it. So I have this bioenergetic healing practice, and I just won't work with clients that don't want to I only work with ones that are really feeling called to transform their lives. Because otherwise, I don't want to push things. They'll get there on their own. I do love the skeptic's path because that was my path. And I love the skeptics because man, there's probably lots of people out there that think I'm crazy or whatever. That's fine. Because they're going on their journey, and whatever truth they earn, they freaking earned it. It wasn't an easily done thing. And that's kind of mine. I don't believe it until I experience it. And, I just see all these new agey circles where everyone just believes everything the person says. So Alex, I actually really appreciate your caution on this. I personally feel this frustration because I'm a blogger, religion blogger for the Huffington Post. And what I've noticed is if you actually blog about spirituality, the actual essence or experience of it, it's hard for them to post. If you blog around things, then you can get it out there. But it's like a watering down that constantly has to happen. That said, I'm still grateful there's some type of bridge to mainstream culture.
Wow. Talat, every time you say that, there's 14 different directions I could go with it. But let's just hone in on that because it kind of surprises me in a really interesting way of the spirituality angle. I think what I hear you saying is people go, yada, yada, spirituality. And yet when you dive into it and say, oh no, it's a progressive new age Christian ayahuasca church, boom, now at least you've connected on some level and you can start having a dialogue that brings it back to something that people have a reaction to. Am I getting that right or am I totally getting that wrong?
I mean, I have to say you lost me. I mean, one, I would never say that Daime is a new age thing. It's one of the most intense disciplines I've ever come across. I mean, imagine doing meditation on...
Why does New Age get such a bad name? I guess I've been guilty of slamming it too. We know what New Agey means, but doesn't it need to be rehabilitated and reintroduced?
I'm a believer in some words are unfixable. I'll give you a few. New Age, activist, hippie. I think all of these they're so laden.
Activist from an activist. You know what? I'm going to totally switch gears. You got to tell people who are listening to this and are kind of already spaced out in this conversation about Johnny America and that path, that part of your life.
Yeah, so I was working for the September 11th Fund's ongoing recovering program. And I was very moved by the people there that was so upset of George Bush creating wars for what they thought were like political gain. And they were using September 11th to enact, some real atrocities, I feel. And I feel like now that looking back on it, we can look at Iraq and Afghanistan and say, wow, we should have thought a little more.
Yeah, really?
Right.
Yeah.
And so at that time, I was so frustrated and I wanted to do something because of that work at the September 11th Fund to get involved. And I'm an artist and I had been to Burning Man. So I had this kind of wild-eyed idea to lead an American revolution against King George II and his corporate tyranny. And so it was these media pranks we did where we dressed up as very fancy, shiny patriots. It was like if you took Bootsy Collins and Benjamin Franklin and put them into like some particle accelerator, you would have gotten this out of it.
Yeah.
And the media loved it. Like we were in Time magazine. I was on the cover of New York magazine, a lot of media. And I think like the 500,000 other people that were protesting, that was the largest protest ever against a political convention in New York City. I thought political action alone could change the day. And then what happened is he won that election. And I looked at the last year of my life. I mean, activists are always talking about burnout. And I was burnt out. And just looking at the global situation and a lot of that Garden of Eden stuff we were talking about. And I just thought, my God, we need a paradigm shift. Democrat, Republican, none of these institutions are even fit to face the titanic problems we're looking at. And, I was looking for a paradigm shift. And as you might remember in the book, my girlfriend, Jade, who I think is an awesome character in the book. I love her character. But she tells me that I've been stressed about politics and paradigm shift for months. And I need to take some MDMA and get my ass on the dance floor. And that night, for the first time in months, I got out of my head. I got into my heart, into my body. And I connected with the people around me in community, and this energy was moving through me, this higher vibrational energy. And by the end of the night, poof, the lights turned on and I could start seeing what I now understand are energy fields. Some people might say this auras around people and things, which was really hard to integrate for a long time.
Let's talk about that integration, and let's also talk about the drug use, because obviously that's going to be highly controversial with a lot of people. I did ecstasy, and it opened me up to these energy fields, and I'm a bioenergy healer. That's just going to strike people. It's going to get a reaction. And I did DMT, and I kept doing more and more and more. Dave's telling me doing more and more and more, and I opened up. You know what? I want you to kind of address that head on, because I've heard you do it, and I think you're very thoughtful and have some deep insights into how and when these other substances might work with our consciousness in a way that actually moves us forward. But I wonder if you also have thoughts on when maybe it's not such a good idea.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and there's most times that alternative substances are not a good idea, and that's how I see them used in society. I sound a little judgmental there. Let me pull back my tone a little bit, because we're humans. It's a risky, dangerous place as it is, but yeah. So that's a criticism I have: is this guy's not a serious spiritual seeker. He took a pill and thought he saw something. That's cheating. And I'm sure you can go on Amazon.com and see a review or two like that. But you're going to see a lot more that say, wow, he's spot on. And I feel like this is very ancient. What was going on there is taking a psychoactive, entheogenic, I think is the word I would use, entheogenic, God-inducing substance, and coming together as community and singing and dancing as old as it gets. Nobody's going to, I hope, go to some Native American and be like, you know what? You really shouldn't take that peyote and sing those prayer songs. And I feel like this neo-tribal revival happening with the festival culture, they are revisiting that in ways. That said, I also see a lot of people at festivals that are like, yeah, man, I've done mushrooms and I did some ecstasy and I did this. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Have you eaten today? Are you grounding? they don't even know to connect or pray with the medicine that they're taking. Personally, now I probably will never do MDMA again because I'm on a deeper initiate's path. I only work with the medicines of my tradition, which happen to be the daime, which is this version of ayahuasca. And the great thing about it is it's a plant accelerator. It's like rocket fuel. So if you use it very safely, like the daime does, it's one of the strictest rigid containers I've ever come across. You can clean out your system, the energetic system, very quickly. You can illuminate the electric energy body, which is what most mystical traditions talk about, quicker. But if you use it improperly, and I see plenty of ayahuasca use, like home brewers, or they go to the Amazon and they go to Iquitos, which is Iquitos, Peru. It's like the Times Square of ayahuasca, and they end up with a bad shaman, and dark stuff can get in. So we really need to learn protection, reverence, responsibility, self-actualization, and have a mature relationship around it. I think one of the reasons we have an immature relationship around consciousness-altering substances is because they're kind of prohibited in weird ways. I think the drug we have the most issues with is alcohol. The misbehavior I see in New York City with alcohol and just recklessness that happens here is quite concerning to me.
Sure, but Talat, you've now kind of stepped into territory that has a lot of minefields in it. And Graham Hancock, who again wrote the introduction to your book and did a very nice job of it, and is of course well known for chronicling his own use with ayahuasca and other substances, has, and you're probably aware of this, but he's talked about connecting with the spirit, a spirit entity that is associated with ayahuasca. And he has found that in his work, or his research, if you want to call it that the shamans he's worked with have said, yes, there is one spirit entity that is behind ayahuasca. So, there's just a lot of different places we can go here, but now we're into connecting with, if we take that at face value, we're at using this plant that is somehow altering our consciousness, and we're connecting with some other spirit body that we don't know anything about. And now you're talking about we have to use it carefully, and you're just trying to put the FDA warning on it and stuff like that. Aren't we just in just a minefield of questions that we can't even begin to answer? Should we be going there? Should we even venture into that? Can't we just sit at home, cross our legs, and meditate?
Well, sure, you can do that. I mean, where I'm coming to, that's where I'm saying it's everyone's journey. For one, it's not me to say anyone should or shouldn't do any of this. I'm just sharing experiences of my life.
No, and I'm. Don't get me wrong. I'm not criticizing you, and I love that you're out there sharing it. But but let me get back and fine tune that question. What about the spirit behind ayahuasca? Is that something we need to worry about?
Well, first, I want to say I don't mind if you criticize. I'm just I'm just here trying.
But I'm not. I'll let you know when I'm criticizing.
Because I'm just being honest. If things strike me in a certain way, I'm just I'm trying to be honest and not be right or good anymore. Just honest and authentic and vulnerable as much as I can. And when I'm coming to terms with this, for me, look, the daime is different than ayahuasca. Daime is considered connected to this Christ consciousness energy, this divine, very healing, high vibrational, high energy. Ayahuasca, I don't trust as much because I hear about dark shamans. I've seen dark shamans that use it in life. Daime is very specific, it's a whole doctrine of love and light and healing in the transformation of ourselves and even suffering souls that need help. So I really trust it. But that said, I probably would never do ayahuasca again. I would do daime. But I used to do 2 or 3 ceremonies a month. And it was very healing, but it was also very difficult on my system because you're challenged so psychologically in the body and the mind, everything. And so now I'll do it once a month because I need that healing, but it's just calmer. And so I'm doing a lot more yoga and meditation and these things to integrate it all. That said, the most profound yoga experiences I have are through Santa Maria, which is sacralized marijuana or cannabis in the daime, some of the traditions, they pray, they do the rosary, and they consider Santa Maria really connected to like this kind of the Virgin Mother, and also the Queen of the Forest. There's not really an either or in the daime. It's not like, oh, it's the Virgin Mother, it's the Queen of the Forest, it's the cosmic mother. I feel like the daime understands how fluid and complex the universe is. It's not creating rigid boundaries or ideas. So I do this, and I gotta say, man, working with the spirit of Santa Maria very carefully, maybe once a week, it's really upped my yoga practice. I go to classes, but I just understand it more on an energetic level. And what teachers had been trying to tell me for years, I get now much more. I finally am starting to understand.
I'm trying to think. I don't want to keep asking the same questions. I guess the question that keeps going through my mind is, how does someone know if they're supposed to open themselves up in this way through these substances?
Okay, so I'd like to answer this in two ways. First, I see with ayahuasca is if people are either called or they're not. If they're called, they'll find it, because it's still a Schedule I substance in the U.S., even though it's one of the most healing medicines I've ever come across. I don't know how tobacco is legal and ayahuasca is not, but they're called to it and they'll find it, and then usually it'll go well. If they're kind of half-ass, it doesn't come around usually, or they force it and then they might end in trouble. I think people really need to feel a calling to something. And if you're not called, don't go there. Trust your inner self. We're just taught not to trust our inner self all the time. Like, this is a message I would just like to give to everyone out there. Is like, maybe we could end the dialogue, should we, shouldn't. And it could be more of like, what is right for you? How is it integrated in who you are? Okay, so that said, I just want to put a framework. Is I think we're working from a kind of a misconceived perception on drug and non-drug. I don't even call these drugs. I call them entheogens in medicine. Drug is for me Prozac or aspirin or something. This is like a homeopathic remedies or something, or herbal. That said, I really want to just say, Alex, that I think the world, we are feeling sentient beings. And everything we touch, everything we ingest is a conscious altering experience. So if you're around loving people and they're opening your heart, it opens your heart, it changes your consciousness. If you eat a lot of processed sugar, that is a conscious altering substance that can really affect you. If you eat ginger, all of these things, if we can start understanding ourselves as living, feeling, breathing beings and sensors that are connected to the world, suddenly this line that we draw between things kind of starts to disappear. And this is probably as new age as I'm going to get, but any energy healer that's connected and if you tap your hand into a crystal and start feeling those frequencies, the energy, because the geometries of that energy is all geometry in the end, and textures and stuff and colors, you can start absorbing that through your hand and in through your heart. You can actually start getting healings. And I think we all have negative energies in us and that turn into disease and things like that. And there's some other ways we can heal that we're not aware of because we don't understand how sentient we really are.
Awesome, Talat. Great.
It seems like everything I've been doing has been going into a minefield.
Well, that's the terrain. I mean, that's your mission, man. I mean, look at your life, look at your experience so far, and that's the story you've written. So you can't write yourself out of the plot.
And look, your mission is you are a bridger and a translator. So maybe what the dialogue we're having here is I'm kind of leaning off the edge a little bit, and you're holding a hand out and calling back to some other folks and being like, "Hey, what's going on the edge?" And
the other thing that I think I'm trying to do, because I struggle with it myself, is there's a lot of people leaning off the boat on all different sides. And I'm comfortable with that. But I also have a side of me that says, hey, why aren't these two together? Why is this person leaning that way? And I like them, respect them, and appreciate their path and what they've gone through and their experience. Then why is this person saying something else? And I'm okay with there can be many paths and there can be this diversity, but I want things to kind of make a little bit more sense in this world. I don't want to talk to one person who says, reincarnation is a myth. It isn't real. I've gone and ascended and it doesn't happen. And then speak to someone else and say, reincarnation, yes, but you only reincarnate 3 times. And then I talked to another person, very advanced, someone I really like, just talked to and said, hey, forget about the whole idea of reincarnation. We are simultaneously reincarnating all the time. And that's the only way we can explain this idea of time being kind of this illusion that we're in. So we got all these people, and then you come along and you're saying a really beautiful thing. I like what you said about, reframing the role of if our body is and our brain is this vessel that is tuning consciousness, then realize that we're constantly messing with the tuning no matter what we're doing, with that bag of potato chips, with that cigarette, or with the ayahuasca. And those are conscious choices that we can make at different times. But do you understand my dilemma in trying to get all these people on the boat kind of talking in the same language so I can figure out what to do?
Oh, yeah. I love your dilemma. You talked about what I heard when you were talking about being sentient, being like reflecting what I had said about realizing we're these feeling sensing beings, is when we do that, we can walk with a lot more consciousness of our actions, and how we interact. You read my book, so you've kind of got, you've followed the full journey from complete skeptic to little experience in that. We kind of jumped right into some stuff. I think if people read the book, that, it's got a trajectory. I haven't had anyone say I can't follow that journey when they're doing it. Even atheists that have read the book have kind of been like, that was cool. But in the book, I'm very conscious of not saying anything is absolute. I never say, like, let's take Jesus for example. One of the main questions I get, who is Jesus? Did he really exist? Was it this? Is he a cosmic implant? Is it some archetype? And my answer is, I don't know. I just hold the quantum possibilities of it all being possible, and using discretion to work within that. Because when you really fix something and say this is absolute, in quantum physics, they call it collapsing the wave. You just collapse all these other possibilities into one thing, and it's kind of like a party bummer, really. And I experienced that firsthand. There's this author, I don't know if you've heard of him, Timothy Freak, who wrote the Jesus Mysteries.
Sure.
And I saw him, and he said live in front of a whole Gnostic group I was kind of coordinating, Jesus did not exist. Absolutely, this human never walked the planet. And my whole Gnostic group left like pissed off at him. We love this guy, but we were like, why? How can he say, like, unless he was there investigating all the lands of, Israel at the time, maybe he could possibly say that's true. And so he collapsed the wave for us. And like I said, it was kind of a party bummer, really.
So, Talat, one thing I want to talk about before we run out of too much time is this Evolver.net thing that you've helped found and that you're a part of. It's a fascinating experiment. Tell people what's going on. What is Evolver.net?
Well, I think I got to explain how it started, which was I had actually gone through this initiatory journey of mystical experiences and such, being a countercultural guy as well. And I wanted to get back into activism, but a different type. I didn't want to do the same kind of stuff, going through mainstream media and having them smash and squash all your beautiful stories into either taking out the essence or being cynical. And at that time, I ran into Daniel Pinchbeck, author of 2012, The Return of Quetzalcoatl, Ken Jordan, a digital democracy pioneer, and this artist, Michael Robinson. And they were starting up a magazine called Reality Sandwich. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, I'm on board, because it was exactly what I wanted to do. It was media activism about transformation. And all of these guys, and it started off as dudes. We now have a lot of women running the organization, which I'm happy about. But what we had all been kind of these counterculture activists, artists, writer guys, and we suddenly had these mystical experiences and became interested in like Buckminster Fuller design science and shamanism and open space technology and complementary currencies. We saw all these different avenues, the green movement, being interconnected. And so we launched this website, Reality Sandwich, where we could share our stories with this culture to see who's out there. And very soon we gathered a pretty dedicated international audience. But what we saw is they didn't want to just stay online. They really wanted to transform their communities. So we started up what we called Evolver spores, based on the mycelial interconnected spore networks out there that in nature that create so much abundant life, and they kind of share information with each other. And we started regional chapters, and we now have 50 Evolver spore chapters out there. It's great. They host alternative film screenings for movies that have no other place to go, like Wake Up or Thrive or that kind of thing. Book tours. I got to do an amazing book tour around the country and in Canada as well. Eco festivals, cleaning up beaches, permaculture gardens. They started a local currency in Baltimore, helped that's now in 200 stores. They've started time banks and gift circles. So a lot of positive, good, transformational things. We've had a very esoteric conversation, but I'm a really practical person, and so are the people in Evolver and Reality Sandwich. So we want to see this consciousness really grounding and taking root. And maybe that's my problem with a lot of the New Age movement, is it seems very self-absorbed, workshops, self-improvement, but it's not like, how do we act in the world? And maybe that's one of the reasons I'm so excited about like Jesus as a mystical figure, is he's kind of a yogi and an activist at the same time, turning over tables in the temple, that kind of thing. And also I'd like to say, as an energy healer, this is a larger scale project of mine. I have a lot of individual clients, and it's just such rewarding work seeing their lives transform. But I think as a society, energetically, we're a house divided. We fight for resources, we fight for money, jobs, whatever it is. And what the Evolver chapters are working on doing, and there are a lot of others too, we partner with a lot of other groups, is I'm seeing develop as more of a sacred geometry, where instead of blocking each other, we start sharing each other's resources. We create these circles of energy that actually can create abundance instead of scarcity, and flow the resources around in a way that they haven't with more of the hierarchical models.
Yeah. I'd love to go there. There's just so many problems with activism. There's some fundamental spiritual questions about whether we are supposed to act or whether we're just supposed to. There's a backdoor materialism to activism that is inescapable. And that is that, isn't the world perfect just the way that it is? And isn't our awakening really an awakening to that? How do you deal with that part of it? I'm sure you've come across that. How do you deal with that vibe, if you will?
Well, I think that's a very deep study that you're talking about. And it's one I'm starting to see with Occupy people. Like Evolver was very helpful for them in being like, don't just complain about everything. Let's vision what we can create. So, our model is really about creation. And I think spirituality is very creative. I mean, there's a reason. You know what? I think you asked a great question, Alex. When it cut out, you asked about activism. Like, there's this thing about activism, which I thought I like that question.
I guess the part I'd like to hear you kind of talk a little bit about is this idea of materialism. I mean, if you buy into materialism, both as an individual, if you think you're a biological robot and that's all you are, well, man, you're lost. And if you buy into materialism as it exists in our society, that we need to get all we can and we need to go bomb other people, all that stuff, you're lost. But as soon as you cross that chasm and you say, okay, there's something more, then I think you run into this problem of really exactly what we're talking about, and that is materialism keeps wanting to creep itself back into the equation. From that questioning part that you're saying, the limitless possibilities, non-collapse of the wave function, to this, hey, I need to take action here. I need to go do this. I need to vote for this candidate. I need to do that. Isn't there the risk there that we kind of get into this backdoor materialism again, where we really think that we're building this stuff that's going to do this stuff for tomorrow? You know what I'm saying? Isn't there a little bit of kind of creeping back into that we're in control thing?
Oh, yeah. But I think it's both. Once again, we've set up an either or, and I think it's both and. Because if I look at most of my clients, most of them come in and think we're going to talk about past lives and this and that and nice high. Most of them need to get in the material world a little bit. They need to get in their bodies and, find out how to figure out jobs and live an abundant life. That doesn't mean buy a mansion, but it just means to know how to support themselves and talk with people. Like I don't want to deny that aspect, because it is important. And I denied it for many years of my existence. And maybe that was why I was a marginalized activist. On the other hand, I definitely saw this with like Occupy. It was very frustrating for me seeing all the projected anger about the financial. It's good I actually believe I do a lot of anger work with clients. It's good to express anger, but when you project it at others, it creates more of that fear culture. It's actually a violent energy projected. And we call that psychic attack. And there was so much of that going, so many projections, so much anger at this. And you could tell it was, one, exhausting them out. It wasn't just to the police or everyone else. They were getting their energy systems like depleted. And what I liked with Evolver in this is we're more of like, oh, how can you create? How can you follow your bliss and your passions and do what you love? And I think this is Joseph Campbell talks about this. This is a dance we have of integrating kind of, in my book I talk about this serpent energy, which is the material, the mother, and the dove or eagle energy, which is more of the spirit and the freedom and the flowing. And that's the beautiful cosmic dance that you see actually really manifested in the dragon, who is a being that's very magical in Eastern cultures because they have managed sky and earth and mastered all of the elements, water, these things. And so I think what you've brought up, Alex, is a great study that we all do. It's an alchemy of walking as a human and being as a human on this planet. It's being and doing and creating a right relationship between that.
That's awesome, Talat. And I think you've drawn out a couple of really nice parallels there between, in this case, non-action and action. And what I hear you saying is we're all acting anyway. So let's be more conscious of the actions that we're taking. And I think you're doing the same thing when you're talking about using any substances. Hey, we're taking substances into our body anyway. Let's just be more aware of what substances we're taking in and how they're affecting our ability to move towards whatever we're trying to move towards. So, awesome work, man. I can see why everyone's so into Talat Jonathan Phillips and the Electric Jesus. Tell us a little bit about what else is going on with you, where people can find more about you or find you in the flesh.
Oh, great. Yeah. Well, I'm moving to San Francisco in a month, so I'm very excited about that. And I have international healing clients. I'm now moving part-time with Evolver to devote a lot more time to my healing practice. So I do Skype sessions if anyone's interested. Also, I'll probably be doing a healing school in the fall. I'm really being called to that because there's only one of me, and I'd like to have some other people to recommend folks to using the certain bioenergetic techniques that I use. So that's going on. Also, Alex, I just want to put a call out there. If folks are intrigued about the Electric Jesus book, if they buy the book, you can buy it, on Amazon very cheaply. If you want a signed copy, you can get it at my website, talathealing.com. That's TALAT. Just send me an email with the receipt if you get it on Amazon or something, and I'll send a 25-minute chakra activation MP3 gift. It's a sound healing. It's using color, vibration, that kind of stuff. And if you believe it or not, you can give it a try. But just make sure when you email me that you say that you heard it from this show to get that gift. And that's a little thanks. And Alex, I want to say thanks, man. I really appreciate your perspective and the way you hold space and also can challenge. I think it's quite an artistic thing you're doing.
Well, that's great to hear. Thank you so much, Talat. It's been great having you on, and I hope we stay in touch. Would love to hear, as things move forward with you, what you're up to. So let's stay in touch.
Nice. Yeah. Hopefully I'll see you in Cali.
Thanks again to Talat for joining me today on Skeptiko. Let me tee up a couple of questions from this, and they really have to do with this issue that kept coming up between being and doing, both in terms of how we approach other substances and how we approach action. So the first would be, What about this whole idea of drugs, about hallucinogenics, entheogens, as the Gnostic crowd likes to call them? I thought Talat had one of the best answers I've heard for that, and that is everything is affecting our consciousness, is perturbing our consciousness, so why get too hung up on whether it's ayahuasca or refined sugar? But I don't think that really totally fits, does it? And the other issue related to that is, don't we always come back here? And if we always come back here, then what's the big need to go there? So the question, I guess, would be, do you think there's an appropriate place for hallucinogenics for people who are seeking spiritual or consciousness development? And the second question would be this question about being versus doing. How do we decide what are the right actions? I mean, we sure know there's a lot of unintended consequences out there. How do we know when we are supposed to act and how we are supposed to act? And to what extent can activism be the right choice? When is it a good idea to rally other people and oppose other groups? Or in some spiritual sense, is that always folly because things are always the way that they're supposed to be? So a couple of broad questions. Hopefully Michael Larkin, who's done a nice job of reframing those on the Skeptical Forum, can kind of distill those down to something that's short and concise. We'll look for Michael to do that. Of course, the place to join us and talk about those questions is either on the Skeptiko Forum or in the comment section of the website, both at www.skeptiko.com. That's skeptiko.com. You'll also find there a link to more than 200 previous episodes of Skeptiko and a Facebook and email link for me. I have a couple of interesting shows coming up and many more scheduled. I hope you'll stay with me for all of that. But until next time, take care and bye for now.